BYD, short for Build Your Dream, the Chinese automaker that actually managed to dethrone Tesla. For years, analysts couldn't stop talking about how dominant this company had become. But dominant companies don't watch their profits get cut in half in a single quarter. BYD just did. Dealerships shutting down overnight. Over 300,000 vehicles pulled back in under a year. So what's actually going on inside this company? Stay with me, because this isn't one problem. It's five, and they're all tied together. BYD didn't start as a car company. Back in 1995, it was a battery manufacturer producing rechargeable cells for mobile phones. Wang Chuanfu, the man who built it, wasn't an automotive guy. He had a chemistry degree, and that background is the key to understanding everything BYD became. While the traditional giants like Toyota and Volkswagen were focused on squeezing more efficiency out of combustion engines, BYD was quietly mastering battery technology. Then, in 2003, Wang made a move that raised a lot of eyebrows. He acquired a struggling state-owned automaker and announced BYD would start building cars. People thought he'd lost his mind. What business did a battery company have making vehicles? What Wang understood was something the rest of the industry hadn't fully accepted yet. The electric car wasn't a distant possibility, it was inevitable. And at its core, an electric vehicle is a battery with wheels attached. Control the battery, control the car. Wang already had the battery, so he bought the car company and got to work. The first decade of BYD cars wasn't particularly impressive. Decent enough vehicles, largely derivative, nothing that made the automotive world sit up and take notice. But that wasn't really the point. Behind the scenes, BYD was building its arsenal, filing patents, refining manufacturing processes, and working toward what would become its defining technological achievement, the Blade battery. A proprietary lithium iron phosphate design that was structurally integrated into the vehicle itself, cutting weight and cost while significantly improving safety compared to what competitors were using. Here's why that matters so much. Tesla sources its cells from Panasonic and CATL. Ford and GM rely on outside suppliers. Virtually every Western automaker depends on a battery supply chain they don't own or fully control. BYD manufactures its own cells, its own motors, its own power electronics, and increasingly its own chips. When costs need to come down, BYD doesn't go back and forth with a supplier. It solves the problem internally. That's a structural advantage that's nearly impossible to replicate quickly, and it's what allowed BYD to undercut almost every competitor on price while still making money. In 2022, Wang made the boldest call of his career. BYD would stop producing pure internal combustion vehicles entirely. Every model going forward, electric or plug-in hybrid, nothing else. No other major manufacturer on the planet was willing to make that commitment. The timing turned out to be nearly ideal. Government EV incentives in China were at their peak, fuel costs were climbing, consumer appetite was there, and BYD had options across the entire price spectrum, from an affordable $15,000 city car all the way up to a premium SUV reportedly capable of driving through standing water. What followed was remarkable. By 2023, BYD had overtaken Volkswagen as the top-selling automotive brand in China, not just in EVs, across all vehicles. Then in 2024 came the headline that genuinely shocked the industry. BYD surpassed Tesla in global electric vehicle deliveries. The battery company from Shenzhen had become the biggest EV seller on the planet. Berkshire Hathaway had gotten in early and walked away with enormous returns. New factories were going up across Europe, Southeast Asia, and South America. Every analyst said the same thing. BYD was unstoppable. That word tends to age badly. And in BYD's case, it didn't take long. In May 2025, BYD rolled out price reductions of up to 34% across 22 models simultaneously. Some vehicles dropped by the equivalent of $10,000 in a single day. The narrative being pushed was that this was BYD playing offense, using its cost structure to squeeze out weaker competitors and consolidate the market. It looked like a power move. For about 5 minutes, it read like one too. Then the stock fell 8% that same day. Investors weren't buying the narrative. because what the price cuts actually signaled was a serious inventory problem. Industry analysts later confirmed that BYD's dealerships across China were carrying more than 3 months of unsold stock, well over double what a healthy operation looks like. The factories had kept running at full capacity while demand softened beneath them. The lots were full, the showrooms were quiet. Picture a car lot so packed with unsold vehicles that new shipments have nowhere to go. That's not a company firing on all cylinders. That's a company that built its production forecasts on hope instead of actual demand. BYD had overestimated how much the market would absorb, and it wasn't the only one. The success of Chinese EVs had attracted a flood of domestic competitors who'd adopted the same strategy. NIO, XPeng, Li Auto, Leapmotor, all of them fighting for the same buyers in an increasingly crowded space. Meanwhile, the government subsidies that had driven so much of the early EV boom were gradually being pulled back, leaving demand softer than the production numbers had assumed. With inventory piling up and margins tightening, the only option was to cut prices and keep cutting. The resulting price war across the Chinese auto industry wiped out an estimated $69 billion in revenue between 2023 and 2025. Average new vehicle prices dropped more than 11% across the market in 3 years. It got so bad that regulators had to step in and explicitly ban below-cost selling, a rule that had to be invented because manufacturers were already doing it just to keep factories running and workers employed. BYD complied with the rule on paper, then kept discounting through rebates, insurance deals, and trade-in incentives instead. The inventory kept moving, the margins kept shrinking, and the damage showed up exactly where you'd expect. By the first quarter of 2026, net profit was down more than 55% year over year. Let that sink in for a second. This is the company that beat Tesla globally just 12 months earlier. In a single quarter, its profit got cut more than in half. Revenue fell nearly 12%. Domestic market share slid from around 33% down to 26% in a single year. The company that was supposed to be invincible was watching its own backyard slip away. And here's what makes it even more uncomfortable. In 2025, BYD collected over 12 billion yuan in government subsidies, nearly 40% of its entire net profit for the year, coming directly from state support. Strip that away, and the underlying business wasn't producing the returns the headline numbers implied. This wasn't a company winning purely on manufacturing brilliance anymore. It was a company that needed a significant lifeline just to keep its profit figures looking respectable. If you want to understand how a company is really doing, don't just look at the factory output. Look at what's happening at the dealerships. And at the dealership level, 2025 was genuinely ugly. In April 2025, Shandong Changjing Holdings, one of BYD's largest dealer groups in China, collapsed almost without warning. More than 20 locations, over 1,200 employees, around 3 billion yuan in annual business. One of its showrooms had been officially recognized as the top BYD flagship store in the entire country. Within weeks, every location was dark. Customers who had paid upfront for multi-year service contracts, maintenance packages, and insurance bundles had no way to recover that money. Workers reportedly went without pay for up to 6 months. BYD and the dealer group publicly blamed each other. The customers holding worthless paperwork didn't care who was right. The same pattern repeated elsewhere across the country. Investigations pointed to channel stuffing, where manufacturers pressure dealers to take on far more inventory than demand justifies, protecting the factory's shipment numbers while quietly loading the financial risk onto the dealer. The manufacturer reports strong deliveries. The dealer slowly runs out of road, until they don't slowly anymore. Suppliers were being squeezed just as hard. Internal communications from late 2024 showed BYD requesting another 10% price reduction from suppliers for the following year, on top of cuts that had already pushed margins to the floor. And researchers at GMT Research, the firm that helped expose the true scale of the Evergrande collapse, estimated BYD's real adjusted debt at around 323 billion yuan. More than 10 times the official figure built not through conventional borrowing, but by stretching out supplier payment terms and effectively using the supply chain as an interest-free credit line. Now, if you've watched this far, hit subscribe, tap the notification bell, and drop a like if this breakdown is useful. It genuinely helps the channel reach more people. Okay, back to it. Because it gets worse. On top of everything else, BYD was managing a growing string of quality problems. September 2024, around 97,000 Dolphin and Yuan Plus vehicles recalled over a steering defect with fire risk. January 2025, roughly 7,000 Yangwang Yu, 8 SUVs recalled, fire risk again. October 2025, the biggest one, over 115,000 vehicles, including Tang SUVs and Yuan Pro EVs, covering a drive motor controller prone to circuit board failure and battery housings with sealing poor enough to let water in. Then November 2025, nearly 89,000 Chin Plus hybrids recalled for a battery defect capable of causing sudden, complete power loss while driving. Over 300,000 vehicles in barely 14 months. Each recall had its own specific technical cause. But the pattern underneath all of them pointed at the same pressure. A production system being pushed too hard, with cost targets eating into the tolerances that quality control depends on. Owners added to the picture too. Videos spread online showing interior panels that flexed under light pressure, a structural beam on a mid-range model that could be visibly bent without tools, and surface rust forming on a 2-year-old car. For a brand that had staked its reputation on engineering precision, these weren't small details. Then in April 2026, a fire broke out in a parking structure at BYD's own headquarters in Shenzhen. Footage of thick black smoke pouring from the building spread instantly. For an EV manufacturer, the first assumption was obvious, a battery fire at company HQ. Investigators found it wasn't. Contractors had accidentally ignited insulation material in a storage area near scrapped vehicles. No injuries, no product defect, a contained incident with a mundane explanation. But after 300,000 recalls and viral quality videos, the goodwill wasn't there to wait for the investigation. That's what a sustained pattern of quality failures does to a brand. It doesn't just damage individual relationships. It changes the lens through which every new incident gets read. BYD's Blade battery genuinely performs well in independent safety tests, but trust, once worn down, doesn't recover on a timeline that suits the company. So why have you never seen a BYD on an American road? Because the US applies a 100% tariff on Chinese manufactured EVs on top of regulatory hurdles around connected vehicle software and component sourcing. BYD isn't losing ground in America. It was never allowed to compete there in the first place. So the expansion went everywhere else. Europe, Southeast Asia, Brazil, the Middle East, Central Asia, new manufacturing facilities announced in Hungary, Thailand, Turkey, and Uzbekistan. The 2026 overseas delivery target raised to 1.5 million vehicles, but the international route has its own walls. The EU applied an additional 17.4% duty, citing Chinese government subsidies distorting fair competition. Brazil raised its own import barriers. When Chinese auto exports surged more than double in a single month in early 2026, trading partners responded with exactly the defensive measures that kind of volume tends to trigger. Local factories are the long-term answer build inside the tariff wall, and the tariff stops applying. But factories take years to reach meaningful production volume. They need local supply chains, trained workforces, and regulatory approvals. Right now, BYD is locked out of its biggest potential market, facing rising barriers in its next best ones, and still sitting on excess inventory back home with diminishing places to send it. So let's bring it back to where we started. Build your dream. For a few years, that name genuinely matched the reality. BYD really did beat Tesla. It really did become China's most popular car brand. It really did develop battery technology that the rest of the industry had to take seriously. Those achievements were real, nobody's taking them away, but none of the problems that followed happened in isolation. The price war, the dealer failures, the recall pattern, the debt structure, the tariff walls. These aren't five separate pieces of bad luck landing at the same time. They're five different symptoms of the same underlying condition. A company that grew its ambition faster than it could grow its discipline. Production outran demand. Inflated demand forecasts drove dealer commitments the market couldn't support. The pressure to maintain volume forced price cuts that destroyed margins. Compressed margins created pressure on component costs. Component pressure introduced quality tolerances the product couldn't sustain. And underneath all of it, a subsidy dependency and a financial picture that made the business look considerably healthier than the underlying operations justified. BYD didn't build its empire on patience. It built it on speed, state support, and a pricing strategy that eventually started consuming the very company that invented it. When you scale that aggressively on that many fronts at once, the bill doesn't arrive gradually. It arrives all at once. And in 2025 and 2026, BYD got handed that bill in full. A profit collapse of over 55% in a single quarter, more than 300,000 recalled vehicles in under a year, dealer networks failing and leaving real customers and real employees with nothing. An adjusted debt load, independent researchers put it more than 10 times the official number. A home market share that's already shrinking while the rest of the world keeps raising the barriers higher. BYD isn't going away. It's still the largest EV manufacturer on the planet by volume. It's still expanding. It still has technology and scale that would take competitors a decade to match. But the version of BYD that looked genuinely invincible, where every quarter was a new record, every headline a new country conquered, that version is gone. What's here now is a company managing serious problems across every front simultaneously, trying to demonstrate that what it built so fast can actually be made to last. That's the real story. Not one dramatic implosion, a slow unraveling of a company that grew faster than it could control and is now learning the hard way exactly what that costs. If you got something out of this, hit the like button. It helps this reach more people who care about what's really happening in the auto world. Subscribe and turn on notifications because there's a lot more of this coming, and BYD is far from the last domino. Drop a comment and let me know, is this a rough patch BYD pulls through or the beginning of something much larger falling apart across the whole Chinese EV industry? I read every single one. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.